it's very hard to get recognition as a business person or as an entrepreneur and not just as a scientist. When I came up with this idea, I went to different people and different VCs, and all of them thought that, oh, it's very cute, it's very insightful, and we are very glad to hear that this technology exists, but you are aiming to an unknown market, you are targeting an unknown technology in that industry, and of course you are going to face utilities or governmental entities, which is very hard in the entrepreneurship world.
Welcome to 20-Minute Leaders. Just sit back, relax, and learn from the leaders of today. It's a journey. Each one is different, unique, inspiring. Let's get started. This episode is powered by J Ventures, a community-driven VC fund in Silicon Valley, in partnership with Lomitech, and sponsored by Homeward Ventures, Hippo Insurance, Upwest, Hillel at Stanford, Leap, and Birthright Excel. Welcome to 20-Minute Leaders. Meet Lauren Guy, CTO and co-founder of Utilis. Lauren is an entrepreneur by heart and an avid fan of using the power of remote sensing to achieve the impossible. Lauren co-founded Utilis in 2013 with a novel approach to finding water leaks from space. With a master in geophysics and a bachelor in hydrology and geomorphology, Lauren wrote and executed algorithms being used in Utilis. He possesses 7 patents in remote sensing and SAR. Lauren Guy, welcome to 20-Minute Leaders. How are you?
Great, thank you for having me. I'm great. How are you?
I'm doing great. I'm always excited when I know that I'm about to approach a conversation where I'm going to learn something that I definitely did not know before. You have such an interesting background from bachelor's of science in geomorphology and remote sensing. You'll tell me what that is in a second, from Ben-Gurion University, and then master's of science in atmospheric physics and dynamics from the Hebrew University. For the past 8 years, the CTO and co-founder of Utilis. So tell me a little bit again about geophysics, just so that we have a streamlined conversation.
So geophysics basically describes the relationship between physics and different interactions that happens in the atmosphere or the world around us and space, together with the geosciences, which is geology, geography, geomorphology, and everything that relates to geology and the interaction between them. That's basically what geophysics is about.
And so if we look today at where we are in terms of the world, what are some of the pending questions that geophysicists might be concerning themselves with that are really interesting?
So we can divide that to 2 things. We can start with other planets or space, which is a big thing for geoscientists. And this is actually where I came from. So as I worked on my master and other studies, we were actually focusing on how we can find water on Mars. And because we cannot walk on Mars yet, we use satellites to find water. And then, of course, we cannot see water on the surface of Mars. And if there is water or indication of water, it has to be under the ground. So as a geophysicist, you try to find a certain wavelength, like microwave, that can actually penetrate the ground. And you can see water even hundreds of meters below the surface.
Mm-hmm. And so I guess that's purely through different mathematical based algorithms that you're trying to isolate, what's happening without actually visualizing it.
Correct. So as we know, that humans know how to take different wavelengths and to contribute them into our day-to-day lives. We all know X-rays, which enable us to see through the body. We all know infrared, which enable us to see heat or to see in the dark. And what microwave is exactly like that. Microwave has other capabilities, and one of them is, of course, penetrating the soil, but it's also have other very cool capabilities like locating water very, very well. It can actually move through clouds and different weather. So we all know Google satellites images where suddenly you want to see a certain place and there's a cloud blocking everything. With microwave, this phenomenon will not happen because microwave can penetrate the clouds, and basically clouds are transparent to it. That's why, by the way, a microwave is big not only for geophysicists, but also for the defense industry for apparent reasons. So definitely.
All right. Okay. And so obviously a lot of the things that we're talking about, they're very heavily research based, and, looking forward, now into the more the actual business sector and the different, opportunities that there are in the business world for asking such questions. When you go back 8 years as a scientist and a physicist, how do you go about thinking, how can you actually commercialize some of these understandings?
So when I finish my studies, I actually look for a way to contribute what I learned into actual insight, to something actual can help the planet. And as a person that grown in Israel, we've always been aware around water. We've always been aware of conserving water. So water was and still a big issue in Israel. So that was my first go-to market. But still, we all know where there are water on Earth. So it's not really relevant. And then I digged even more and I learned an amazing number that 30% of the water that we are transporting to the end customers are being lost into leakages, which is quite an amazing number.
Really?
Think about water we are taking from reservoirs, even hundreds of miles away from the client. You transport them, and just a few feet before the client, it just go into the leak. So think about the amount of water that's being lost. Even more than that, think about the energy. An amazing number that I learned in California, for example, and it's quite similar in other states and even developed other countries, that 17% of the energy of the country is pushing water. Now think out of those 17%, 30% are leakages. Think about the huge amount of energy and water that we just waste into the ground. So once I found out that this vertical has actual issues with no real solutions, that's how I decided to focus on the water leakages market and how we can use satellites and microwaves and sensors in order to solve that.
So let's dive deep into that, because that's fascinating. How do you actually use satellites and the microwaves to figure out where the leakages are?
Yeah, so in 2013, I founded Utilis. And Utilis is a data company. We do not operate satellites. We do not operate hardwares and so on. We just rent airtime for different satellites around the globe, more precisely microwave satellites. There are some that orbiting Earth as we speak. And what we basically say to the satellite, please take an image of San Diego, for example, the next week. It gives us the raw images in microwave sense, meaning it doesn't look exactly like we all know in optical images. It's basically a matrix of numbers of different returns or signals we are getting from the soil. And we take this raw data and we analyze it, and we actually looking for not only water, but more precisely treated water. We can tell the difference from space, which I think is quite fascinating. If the water that you have in your cup now is water, or it's rain, or it's treated water, we can tell the difference. And once we got to that capability, we have the assumption that if there is treated water under the ground, it has to come from a leak and from a pipe. And that's how the entire technology and solution and market evolved around that.
And so when you're just starting out, as a scientist, what steps now on the entrepreneurial side, how do you actually go about and partner with those operating the satellites and figure out who can you sell this information to? I mean, obviously there's a big gap between, doing your bachelor's and master's in the subject, becoming a domain expert in this, but then actually going and piecing everything together, and piecing the information together to actually sell it.
So I can divide it into two answers, actually. So the first answer is exactly what you described. It's very hard to get recognition as a business person or as an entrepreneur, and not just as a scientist. When I came up with this idea, I went to different people and different VCs, and all of them thought that, oh, it's very cute. It's very it's very insightful, and we are very glad to hear that this technology exists, but you are aiming to an unknown market, you are targeting an unknown technology in that industry, and of course you are going to face utilities or governmental entities, which is very hard in the entrepreneurship world. So that was the first barrier. The second barrier, which I was quite surprised, was actually the clients. In the beginning, I was quite sure that when I will come to the clients with this solution, clients meaning utilities and around the globe, they will just,
the water providers, the ones in the supply chain.
Yes.
Right?
I was pretty sure that they will line up to buy the solution because it's so cool and there are no other solutions for that. And I learned that no one waited for me. Even though you can bring a new technology into a very old-fashioned market, it doesn't mean they will jump on you instantly. It's actually the opposite. Because they're used to doing things so old-fashioned and just doing it manually, or actually even doing nothing, you can come with the best idea ever, and it doesn't mean that they will necessarily buy your solution. So actually the first obstacle was actually teaching the market that this solution can benefit them. There's actual ROI, and it's not just cool. And then slowly and surely, the clients were more agreeing to accept that technology with a lot of effort, by the way, by customer success managers, and holding them by hand and showing them the actual meaning of looking for leakages. Yeah.
Now, what was it that turned the table, do you think, in this case? Was it, when they saw a leak that they weren't aware of, that they saw how efficient it could be? What was the turning point?
So I can tell you the turning point for me and the turning point for the client. The turning point for me was our first client in Israel, which was Tel Aviv. We gave them, but by the way, they were very skeptic about that solution. It's like some charlatan coming from space and telling them where to dig with a weird X-ray vision. But they agreed to be a part of a certain pilot, and I sent them to a certain location. I still remember the street. It was on Nordau Street in Tel Aviv. We went to that location. The contractor on site was also very skeptical. He told us there's no leak here. I'm sure of that, but because the utility agreed to take part of the pilot, he dug. And once he started digging, there was a huge leak surfacing the surface. And that was the first, wow moment for me that this technology actually works. That's from my side. From the utility side was actually our first client in the US, which is a very big utility on the West Coast. And we delivered them thousands of leaks, and they started to fixing those leaks, and seeing 12 months after that they actually reduced their leakages percentage from 25% to even 20 or 15% with only 1 year, which usually they only decrease that maybe by 0.5% a year. So like 20 times better. That was a big wow moment also for the market, and of course for me as well.
And so I can only, I think that one thing that is important to then understand here is that these leaks are actually happening under the ground. You cannot visualize them as you're roaming the streets. I actually live on Nordau, so I'm imagining walking on the street and having no idea that there's a leak underneath me. But going back to that story, when you're there and you're digging and you're seeing that there's a leak, what is the reaction? Because you mentioned that the wow factor happened with a client in the US, but I can't imagine there not being a wow factor back in Tel Aviv when they're digging this hole.
So there was a wow factor even for the clients. I cannot deny that. But again, the market was very skeptical in the beginning because we are a statistical solution, meaning not every leak we send to the client is actually a leak. Mm-hmm. And Israelis love to focus on the bad things sometimes, not just the good things. So, for example, we gave Tel Aviv 10 leaks in the beginning and only 4 of them were correct, meaning 6 were nothing. And that's created some skepticism. But that's part of teaching the market the true value, because let's take the solution before Utilis came. Before we came, they maybe found 1 leak a day by just walking the streets and listening to pipes via acoustic methods and just looking for the leak. And maybe they found 1 leak a day. Now Utilis came we give them 10 locations a day, and you know what? With only 30% success rate, they find 3 leaks a day. This is still 3 times better than what they do. Now, today we're around 90%, which is much, much better, but showing them the ROI, not just focusing on a single leak, haven't we found it or not, that was the true game changer for the clients as well. It was very hard in the beginning, very hard in Israel, by the way, but eventually the number just popped out and you cannot deny the actual contribute to the system.
And so what's happening today? So fast forward a few years, you've been running for quite some time. You have a lot of people working with you, a lot of really amazing people. What's happening today with Utilis around the world?
Yeah, so again, I started alone in 2013. Right now, Utilis is around 60 people in the US, Israel, and the UK with 3 offices. And although we started as a water leak detection company, and my son called me a plumber from space, we don't see ourselves as a water company. We see ourselves as an insight as a service company, meaning we are not only focusing on the water vertical, we're also focusing on other verticals where microwave can contribute to that. Mainly for infrastructure and mainly for earth sciences, not defense or other stuff. But indeed, we give insights to different utilities or private companies or even BI insights to end clients about what's going on in the soil, what's going on with different infrastructure on the soil, soil moisture, and so on and so on. Right now, Utilis is working in 55 countries. By the way, the only way to achieve 55 countries in 7-8 years is remote sensing. And again, that's the true power of satellites.
Right.
I can sit at my home with boxers in my backyard, just telling the satellite to take an image, and that's it. I get the data, I analyze that, and then give the results even to the other side of the world. And you know what? We worked with Dubai even 5 years ago, where Israel didn't have relationship with Dubai. So that's the true power of using remote sensing. We have around 400 clients around the world. We found 35,000 leaks.
Oh my God. Wow.
Which is a huge number. We found 7 billion gallons of water per year.
Wow.
Which also is a huge amount of water.
Holy
not
crap.
to say the energy. So the impact is real. Yes. So we are very proud of the solution.
I love it. These are exactly the sort of companies that get me excited. The impact is huge, and we can only, we can play a really quick simulation of how this impact then goes and translates into the daily life of every person in this world, and the butterfly effect of it over the years. And I think it's just incredible.
Indeed. And I think another very cool thing is that a lot of people always wonder why we spend so much money on space, why we have the race for Mars, why we're spending money on satellites, why we just waste money where we have real issues on our globe. And that's exactly the reason. Scientists using, space and research around space in order to find solutions to what we have here on Earth, because space or other planets give us insights that it's very hard to see on our globe, and that's the way to do it. So
amazing.
It is a smart investment that show dividends, of course.
I love it. Lauren, thank you so much for sharing this time with me. I really appreciate it. Before we leave, I have a few last questions to get to know you a little bit better. And I want you to go back to your childhood, before, like even with geophysics, is this really what fascinates you as a kid before you reach academia?
Yeah, so my mom always loved to say that I went to sleep since I was 6 with an atlas. So geography was always a big thing for me. I slept with soil maps and geology maps and just maps of the world, and actually collected atlas from all around the world with different versions. So yes, geography and the planet was always big for me since very, very early age, and I'm glad I'm still operating in that market.
And if you look today in your life, what inspires you in your day to day?
So what inspires me, and it might sound like a cliche, but when I look on other startups, especially in the data industry, it's very hard to see how those startups can really contribute the world and not just the shareholders of that company. And that's not saying anything wrong about those companies, but for me, it's very hard to see the value of the end clients. It doesn't have to be like the globe, even companies that give data for specific clients, it's very hard to know what they are actually selling and what's the ROI, and that's what's the value. And what inspires me and what actually inspires our whole team and actually and also the investors around my team is that our solution is very clear, very intuitive, and you can actually see the dividends of what you do to everything: energy, water, carbon emission, and stuff like that. So that's, for me, it's a real inspiration.
And if I were to ask somebody that works with you, either as a client or as a partner or as an employee, what words would they use to describe Lauren?
So the first thing that everyone will describe me as is optimistic. Someone shows me an issue and I'm instantly finding on a way to solve that issue. And that's compared to other, let's say, developers or other R&D guys, which their favorite answer is no, that's not possible. I always try to think of a way to do that, even too much or even too optimistic. And my R&D director always tell me why we are wasting time on that thing. And eventually it shows dividends, because I think that if you really spend your time on finding a solution to something, you can find it in a certain way, in one way or another. So optimism is certainly something that always evolved me. And you say two more things, right?
You choose. Any words that would describe you?
Yes. Also, I think I'm a very calm person. Everything is very laid back, and that also shows how Utilis operates. We are not in a rush, to get to the end goal or to the exit, or to really end this journey. We are very calm. We're very laid back. Our official statement is to help the resiliency of this planet. And we are doing it very slowly and very surely, without a real speed to do that as fast as possible. So I think that's a great way to describe me and to describe Utilis as well. And that's it, I think. I can't think about the third thing right now.
Wonderful. Well, Lauren, I really want to thank you both for these 20 minutes, but really for the last 8 years and the amazing work that you're doing, the impact that you're having on the lives of many others, the impact that you will have. And so I'll take this opportunity to thank, at least on my behalf. And I just love this combination of deep research with commercialization and then the end positive impact. And stay safe and stay healthy. Thank you very much.
Thank you for having me.